social media is, you can scroll through 1,000 different or 100 different contexts within 5 minutes. And that's a big override for the brain. And then the rest of the world seems kind of boring. I think it's clear that the level of autonomic arousal that's associated with emotions, either very high or very low, very happy or very sad, very anxious or very angry, clouds our judgment.
Dr. Huberman's insight into the endless scrolling on social media is a wake-up call for those who seek progress. As he points out, it's like staring at a bone in a corner, a dead end. To achieve your goals, you need to break free from that pattern. Luckily, Huberman's got a solution. In this video, he's going to guide you towards a path of growth and success.
The social media getting dopamine hit after dopamine hit. When we first get on social media for the first time or after a long period of time, the amount of dopamine that's released, we think, is quite substantial. And if you're on social media and you're scrolling and you don't even know why you're scrolling, like you don't even know what you're looking for, your dopamine system has been tapped out and you need to take a break from it. Maybe a couple hours, maybe a couple of days. I think social media is great. I teach science on social media. I see you all the time on social media. There's a lot of great social interaction. There's a lot of opportunity to learn and see things. Some are funny, some are interesting, some are disturbing. But when you're at the point where you're engaging in something and you don't even know what the win is, but you find yourself reflexively engaging in it, your dopamine system is now plummeting. So I look at social media as initially being very dopaminergic, driving reward, surprise, and excitement, but very quickly transitioning to something more like OCD and the kinds of behaviors where it looks, if we were to look at ourselves through the lens of an experiment like we would an animal experiment, we'd think that animal is sick. If you saw an animal digging in the corner, looking for a bone, the dog is looking, you'd think that's really sad. That's us.
His observation about the majority of people waking up like tired zombies is a sad reality. But it doesn't have to be that way. As he suggests, breaking the pattern and feeling energized can set you on a path to success. This is just the beginning of a journey that'll make you stand out from the crowd. Don't settle for mediocrity, my friends. Follow Dr. Huberman's advice and become the best version of yourself.
But I think that by now, most people are aware that getting a really good night's sleep on a consistent basis is critically important, but most people don't know how to do that. In fact, I'm guessing that very few of you out there are consistently getting 7 to 9 hours of really terrific sleep, waking up feeling rested, like you're ready to attack the day, and being able to go through the day feeling focused and alert without dips in energy or focus.
Huberman's insight on the futility of endless scrolling is a reminder that there's a whole world waiting beyond our screens. It's really easy to lose sight of what truly matters when we're constantly bombarded by digital distractions. But when we realize the vast potential that lies outside of our devices, it can leave us speechless.
Unlike email or reading an article online, social media is, you can scroll through 1,000 different or 100 different contexts within 5 minutes. And that's a big override for the brain. And then the rest of the world seems kind of boring. Like, you see people at dinner scrolling their phone. It's because actually the brain wants novelty. It's seeking novelty all the time. These days, I'm turning off my phone in the evenings. I'm on there a little bit, but I'm finding I'm kind of sick of the phone. I think a lot of people are kind of hitting this point where they're like, I'll get on social media for an hour or two a day, but this is getting a little pointless. I think it's clear that the level of autonomic arousal that's associated with emotions, either very high or very low, very happy or very sad, very anxious or very angry, clouds our judgment. It's very clear. And I think the sooner
we give them too much credence too. They're just feelings, man. Like, we don't have to allow them to overtake us and monopolize everything that we do.
They were designed to push us along certain behavioral paths, but they've grown in importance in the last few years. And we could get into a discussion about how social media marketing are designed to capture these very deep limbic aspects of ourselves, and they are. But what's amazing is and important is that everybody has a forebrain. Some people's it seems is more developed than others, but everybody has one, and we have this capacity for what we call top-down control, which is the ability to intervene in our own feeling states and our own action states. And to set some rigor and some real clear marks that we're out to achieve. And I think it's going to start with the generation that's very plastic right now.
Yeah.
Most parents are afraid of stressing their kids because they don't want to, again, I went to a high school where kids, literally at gun high school in the last 10 years, kids have, there've been over a dozen, train track suicides. So those are kids that are committing suicide for different reasons, but a lot of them is because they just feel too much pressure. So obviously we can't pressure kids beyond their capacity to regulate. But the idea that all of our internal states should be driven by external things, that's a foolish misstep also. So I think we need to operationalize what we're going to teach the next generation. Maybe our generation isn't really rescuable, but maybe the next generation is. And if they understand that there's some concepts that sound a little mushy, like gratitude or mindfulness or these kinds of things. But as long as they understand that, for instance, gratitude, which we didn't really touch on, involves a whole other neurotransmitter reward system in the brain, the serotonin system, which buffers us against injury. It can improve wound repair. It can allow us to lean back into these high stress regimes. Learning and, kids learning how to toggle their nervous system back and forth between highly duration, path, outcome, focused states of trying to improve and learn, and then learning how to really relax and chill out and enjoy and be socially connected, because it will allow them to ratchet back in and focus with extreme depth. I suggest people avoid layering dopamine. You have one dopamine system that fortunately can be activated by a lot of different things. So for instance, I love the feeling of being completely rested, going into the gym or going for a run mid-morning, after a cup of coffee, hydrating well, using the bathroom, listening to my favorite music on a sunny day. But that's a lot of things layering in for dopamine. And what happens is that if that becomes your hope and expectation, fine. But if that becomes your requirement for actually having a great run or workout, you're in trouble, because the next time it's not going to be that exciting and you're not going to be that motivated. You actually won't perform as well. So people who use stimulants are often very wired and driven, but have challenges there. So then there's the crash, because anytime you have a big peak in dopamine, there's inevitably a trough that mirrors that peak.
So you can't have it all.
You can't have it all. And my colleague Anna Lemke at Stanford wrote a book, Dopamine Nation. She also was on Rich Roll's podcast about addiction and this playing pleasure balance. It's not just about addiction to compounds like heroin, cocaine, amphetamine. Of course, it's that too. But for instance, anytime we have a peak experience, that peak experience can have a long tail on it, but there will always be a trough afterwards in which dopamine feels low and we feel kind of underwhelmed and kind of depressed. The typical mode of action is to take more of the compound or try and engage in more of the activity that brought that dopamine peak. However, the problem is with each subsequent engagement in that compound or that activity, you get a lower and lower peak, but the trough gets bigger and bigger. And this is how people drive themselves into addictions of different kinds, behavioral addictions and other kinds of addictions. If you're very, very stressed, or you're very, very upset, two things happen. One, it's very hard to take your focus off whatever it is that's upsetting you. And if you don't know what's upsetting you, pure anxiety, but you don't know why, it's very hard to take your mind off of the feelings of anxiety. In those states of mind, there's another component, which is that for whatever reason, and no one really understands why this is, it feels as if the state that you're in will go on forever. Now, when we're in happy, relaxed states, rarely do we think, gosh, this is going to go on forever. And yet when we are in these unfortunate states of mind, we get the idea somehow, it sort of hijacks our perception of time, and we feel like this is never going to stop. If we turn to the body and certain behaviors, we can talk about what those are, we are able to move ourselves along the autonomic continuum. And at that point, when we've done that successfully, and it's actually quite straightforward to do, we are able to think about things differently. We start to get a sense that the way we feel might not be the way we're going to feel forever. And it's in those shifts that we start to realize, my mind actually is not my best friend at these extremes, but there's a lot more to it. You're only getting the tip of the iceberg in those states. So that's why I say, if you can't control the mind with the mind, look to the body to control the mind. Really, the quality studies on humans that have looked at this say try and get as much natural light as you can in the morning hours, whenever it is that is for you, especially the first 3 hours after waking. If you can work outside, great. If you can get near a window, because as opposed to just in a dark conference room, that's better. But if you can get outside, that would be fantastic. But you want to try and view sunlight as early in the day as possible. 5 to 10 minutes on a clear day, minimum. 10 to 20 minutes on a cloudy day, minimum. 20 or 30 minutes on a very overcast day, minimum. Without sunglasses, don't stare at the sun. Please don't damage your eyes. Look slightly off from the sun, but yes, you want to face eastward towards the sun. And on those cloudy days, that's especially important to do. Why? Well, viewing morning sunlight increases cortisol early in the day, which is excellent because you want cortisol elevated early in the day and you want it lower later in the day. And because of the relationship between the cells in your eye that sense sunlight, specifically morning sunlight, believe it or not, that happens, and signal to your hypothalamus, and the relationship between the hypothalamus and the pituitary and other endocrine organs, it sets in motion a dopamine-related cascade in neuromodulators, dopamine, and hormones that lead to states of well-being, elevated mood, alertness, etc. throughout the day. One of the reasons why there's so much, challenge out there with focus and anxiety and depression, there are a lot of reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that people's internal mechanisms aren't anchored to anything regular. Now, this doesn't require being neurotically attached to getting up at a very specific time, going outside, viewing the sunlight, same time every day. These systems, again, will average, but if you can provide them consistent light anchors early in the day and in the evening and avoiding light at night, you will be amazed at the tremendous number of positive effects that can come from that at the level of metabolic factors, hormones, and just general feelings of well-being. In fact, most of us are familiar with what it is to not sleep well and all the terrible effects that has. Maybe one night you're fine, 2 nights even. For the new parents out there, I sympathize with you. But most people are not familiar with what it is to sleep really, really well on a consistent basis. And when you start doing that by controlling your sleep environment, right? Get the proper sleep surface, get the proper pillow, get the temperature in the room right, get your light exposure right, start timing your exercise at normal periods or times throughout the day and week. It's amazing how many other biological systems just naturally fall in line. And this is why whenever people ask me, what should I take? Which is one of the most common questions I get. What supplements should I take? What drugs should I be taking? What things should I be taking? The first question I always ask them is, how's your sleep? So let's talk about sleep. Sleep is this incredible period of our lives where we are not conscious. We might dream, we might twitch, we might even wake up. But in sleep, we are only in relation to things that are happening within our brain and body. Outside sensory experience, in most cases, can't really impact us. And yet sleep is this tremendously important period of life because it resets our ability to be focused, alert, and emotionally stable in the wakeful period. So we can't really talk about wakefulness, focus, motivation, mood, well-being without thinking about sleep. Dopamine has everything to do with how you feel right now as you're listening to this. It has everything to do with how you will feel an hour from now. It has everything to do with your level of motivation and your level of desire and your willingness to push through effort. If ever you've interacted with somebody who just doesn't seem to have any drive, they've given up, or if you've interacted with somebody who seems to have endless drive and energy, what you are looking at there in those two circumstances is without question a difference in the level of dopamine circulating in their system. There will be other factors too, but the level of dopamine is the primary determinant of how motivated we are, how excited we are, how outward facing we are, and how willing we are to lean into life and pursue things. And from that, I will suggest a protocol by which you can achieve a better relationship to your activities and to your dopamine system. In fact, it will help tune up your dopamine system for discipline, hard work, and motivation. Hard work is hard. Generally, most people don't like working hard. Some people do, but most people work hard in order to achieve some end goal. End goals are terrific and rewards are terrific, whether or not they are monetary, social, or any kind. However, because of the way that dopamine relates to our perception of time, working hard at something for sake of a reward that comes afterward can make the hard work much more challenging and make us much less likely to lean into hard work in the future. What we're going to talk about now is how the dynamics of dopamine release that you already are aware of, plus an additional dynamic that we haven't quite talked about, can allow you to leverage dopamine in a way that really will bring you to the holy grail of motivation and drive, which is when effort starts to become the reward itself. In other words, when friction becomes the reward. I know that sounds crazy to some of you, but when friction becomes the reward, you can pass from an idea and a goal, no matter how daunting, to successful completion of that goal while experiencing what essentially will feel like pleasure the entire time. Now, that doesn't mean it will be bliss the entire time, but what is very possible is to leverage the dynamics of both dopamine peaks and dopamine troughs in order to not just maintain your baseline level of dopamine, but to also pull yourself out of any kind of procrastination or other kind of overthinking trenches very quickly and get back into a mode of pursuit.